Hello and welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. I'm your host, Andrew Moses. I'm joined today by Ken Davidoff, New York Post baseball columnist, one of the bright minds in the baseball beat and a staple in New York sports. Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, Ken.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Ken, where I want to begin with you is you've had just a wonderful career so far. Like I said, a staple on the New York sports, national baseball beat. How did you get into journalism and sports reporting initially?
Pretty linear, traditional path, Andrew. I in college, I wrote for my college newspaper, University of Michigan. That helped a lot. I was fortunate to cover some big time events. I'm essentially the same age as the Fab Five, and I got to cover their 1993 run to the championship game, the Chris Webber timeout game. So that really got me some real world experience that really helped me get a real world job. So a few months after I graduated, I got my first sports writing job at a small paper in New Jersey called the News Tribune. And from there, I left to the Bergen Record up in Hackensack, New Jersey. And then while I was there, I was covering high school sports, then college sports, then professional sports. I became the Yankees beat writer for them in 1998, which was 5 years after I graduated from college. Then it was a few more years there. I switched over to Newsday on Long Island, covered the Yankees there, got promoted to baseball columnist at Newsday, and then switched to the New York Post, same job in 2012.
So I want to dig into a ton with you, Ken. So many are curious with any creative, with any writer, especially a journalist, right? Creative process, your workflow, how you go about sourcing ideas. Tell me a little bit about your process.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. My process has definitely changed over time because of my experience, and you should be filling up your data bank every day. Just with conversations you have with other people, with observations you make. So I think, every day, if you pile up 10 tidbits of some sort, whether it's a statistical tidbit or a gossipy tidbit, something like that, and those just keep piling up and up, you get to a point where if you get zero one day, you still have a nice reserve that you can tap into for ideas, for inspirations. And in terms of what I write, it's very collaborative with my editors. Even today I'm working on Hank Aaron's passing, so basically I'm writing two pieces. One was my idea, one was my editor's idea, and I've already made a ton of phone calls today. Have more to make, and I'll be done with everything hopefully by dinner time.
So I want to make sure I understand this. So essentially, you're kind of racking up ideas and things that pop into your head over time. And then when something happens like Hank Aaron's passing today, you have to be in a position to react.
Yeah, and idea and relationships. I mean, this is running next week or down the road?
Sure, running in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
I just didn't want to reveal any state secrets. So, I've already spoken today with Reggie Jackson, with Willie Randolph, about the impact that Hank Aaron had on their lives. I did a Zoom conference call that the Atlanta Braves held with their manager, Brian Snitker, with the legendary Chipper Jones, with Brian Jordan, their former player. And I have relationships with most of these people. So that, I hope leads to more intimate conversations and better quotes from my stories.
So let's talk about so you're talking about accumulating these ideas and you're putting them into a bank somewhere, right? That you have right all up there in your brain. So really, is it all up there in memory? How do you organize it? Has it changed at all over the years? Are you one of these iPhone notes guys, or do you have a bunch of index cards and notepads floating around?
Not really. I have a few files, computer files for specific things, but in general, when I talk about this information that I gather, it's largely in my head, and obviously there's some things that are pressing that I immediately act upon, and it becomes that day's story. But other times you save them for a rainy day, and it's just nice to be able to reach into that bank.
See, it's interesting. I can throughout my career, I can remember a lot of things and I keep a lot in my brain. But like when I read a book or something and I see a line or a passage that's really interesting to me, I'll underline it. And then when I'm done with a book that I really enjoy, I'll go back and I'll actually put on good old fashioned index cards, thoughts. And then I leave them in a pile. And if I'm running short on inspiration on a blog post or stories I want to illuminate on this podcast, I go back to the stack of index cards and I try and get the juices flowing. What about you? Have you ever sat down and you're staring at a blank screen and you're up against a deadline and you just can't get started? What's the Ken Davidoff methodology to getting started? Because anybody can learn from, I think, these skills.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about that specific skill, Andrew, when you talk about, certainly there are times when I'm on a tight deadline, crank out 600 words in a half hour, and I think I've been blessed. I that's not to say it can't be a learned skill, but I think I was blessed with it naturally. And because I know there are certain things I'm not blessed with naturally. I can't cook, I can't repair anything in my home. So it balances out, but I do think for me, this was a natural skill.
So what about work environment? Are you a distraction-free, complete silence guy, or are you a sit in a Starbucks, pre-COVID type of environment? Where do you have to be to get the juices flowing?
Well, no, I'm often at a ball game, and it's certainly not quiet, pre-COVID. So I'm a gentleman I worked with for many years named Fred Kerber, wrote for the New York Post for roughly 80 years or so. I'm doubling that. It was probably 40 years, and he covered all the sports. He covered news, and he was quoting some old timer from his youth who told him, "Learn how to write poetry in a boiler room." So the verbiage might be a little dated, but the sentiment remains very relevant for sports writers. You have to be able to, people are screaming. Let's hope we get back to that point once everyone's vaccinated. Screaming and loud music and all that. And my job is just to stay focused and write my column.
How Melanie Newman, who's a reporter for Masson and the Orioles on the radio, she was on the podcast earlier this spring, and she told me that, and I think this goes back to your point earlier about the importance of relationships. She felt like the inability to be at the ballpark, to be behind the batting cage, to develop the relationships for someone like her who's newer in the industry, and also just spend time around the ballpark, around the people, was certainly a hurdle. How have you navigated that? You mentioned a Zoom call before, but I can't imagine it's the same.
Oh, it's not the same at all. I agree 100% with Melanie. And in that sense, I have the advantage of being older and more experienced. So I have more relationships I can leverage. I feel terrible for people. I don't know exactly how old Melanie is. I know she's newer to the field. But I've seen some younger sports writers around my circles. And I just said, I feel terrible for you. This is not how to do the job. It's not how you learn. And it's not how you build those relationships. It is nearly impossible right now to build the sort of relationships you need to succeed at this job.
So how have you gone about building relationships? I mean, you must over the years throughout your career.
Over the years, okay, yeah, pre-COVID, you FaceTime. I mean, I think it's pretty simple. You
the old FaceTime, not the new FaceTime.
No, not the new FaceTime. No, the old FaceTime.
The real FaceTime.
Yes, the real FaceTime. Introducing yourself, and you always. For me, you start low. Just start with the introductions, and if you have something in common, that's always nice. I'm always happy to play that card. Oh, hey, you're from New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. You went to another Big Ten school. I went to Michigan. Always happy to do that because you want to form that bond, and then you want to start small with people. You want to ask them. For my job, ideally, you want to start off asking them easier questions, and then if you can get to a higher level of trust, then here, this thing's going on over there. I really need to ask you this, and hopefully they feel comfortable enough with me that they trust me to handle that right. If they don't, they don't. But that's the ideal way to start these relationships. Just very simply to build that foundation of trust.
I think it, with journalists and sports writers in general, people assume that you sit in a comfy press box in the air conditioning and you watch and you make these observations and you write a story and the byline's there the next day. In the old days, now it's there, a few minutes later these days. Talk about some of the behind the scenes. This show is called Everybody Pulls the Tarp. You and I have talked about, I'm on this mission to unearth all of the things that go into success, the things behind the scenes, the things outside the boundaries of the job description, the things that people don't always see that contribute to success. What are some of the things behind the scenes, the gritty stuff, the things that maybe people don't assume that Ken Davidoff does to have the success you've had?
All right, so I'll give you a story. I'll give you a story which I think exemplifies what you're saying. And this goes back a ways. This goes back to 1998, when you were just a tot, I think.
A little older than that, but yeah.
So in 1998, I used to sometimes stay with the Yankees in their hotel, and the Yankees traveling secretary would actually book my room for me to get the team rate. Probably not the most ethical thing I ever did, but at the time it was kind of standard operating procedure for pretty much all the media. And there's a hotel in Minneapolis. The Yankees were playing the Minnesota Twins. And they gave me, when I checked in, they said, okay, here's your traveling party. So they gave me the list of everyone in the traveling party, which included the Yankees players. So I got this list, and it was probably about 25% actual names of the players, 75% aliases. So this was very helpful information. I saw their aliases. So that was, let's say that was May. Fast forward to July. Bernie Williams is rehabbing an injury. He's playing in Tampa for the Yankees minor league team, and he re-injures himself. And I said, you know what, just for the heck of it, I didn't have Bernie's cell number. I'm not 100% confident he had a cell phone in 1998. So let me just try. I suspected which hotel he was staying at. George Steinbrenner owned the hotel. So I'm going to try, and I thought I had figured out which alias was his. So I called the hotel. I said, I won't give away the alias. I'd like to speak to this name. And they said, hold on. And they connected me. He didn't pick up. It just kept ringing. But I said, okay. I just kind of kept that piece of paper. And I said, all right, that's Bernie Williams' alias right there. Now fast forward to December or November. November, he's a free agent. Huge story. Where is he going to sign? Is he going to go back to the Yankees? Is he going to sign with the Red Sox? And it got out that he was in Atlanta meeting with the Boston Red Sox. I don't know why it was Atlanta. It was Atlanta. I found out what hotel he was staying at. It was like an airport Marriott. Call the airport Marriott, ask for the alias. Bernie picks up. Hey, Bernie, Ken Davidoff here. Hey, man, what's going on? Hey, you just wanted to check in, about how your free agency is going. And I got an exclusive interview with Bernie Williams. And no one else got that. So that was a byproduct of months of careful, deliberate work to get to that point where I could kind of cash in on the work I had done on that.
Well, you're almost like a detective. You're like part journalist, part detective, I guess you could say, right? You're taking information, you're stashing it away, you're doing things that, candidly, probably other peers of yours at the time maybe wouldn't have put the 2 + 2 = 4 together to say, hey, this might be useful to me, and they might not have had the guts to do it, to pursue that path. Very cool.
Thank you.
Very cool. It's these stories like brighten my day. I love uncovering these stories where people just go outside the boundaries of, the normal thinking or the way it's taught in school, right? Or what the job description says, and think about things that way. We've talked about the relationships with the players. We talked about that great exclusive with Bernie Williams. How have you ever had to deal with players, coaches, managers being critical of any of the work that you've done?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Talk about that.
That comes with the territory. Yeah. There's been a number of disagreements, and a few of them got a little uncomfortable. But I've never thrown a punch, nor had one thrown at me. No, there's been some tension. I mean, Paul O'Neill comes to mind years ago, and I was definitely, I felt bad about. I had written a story that portrayed him negatively, and I said, Paul, the information was accurate, but I said I should have alerted you more precisely to what I was writing. I kind of asked him a vague question the day before, and he froze me out for a while. We talked things through. That was 2001, so we're good now for a very long time. Matt Harvey with the Mets, he was difficult, and we had
difficult to watch as well.
Yeah, we had some tense moments where he didn't like some stuff I had written, and there was a later occasion where I started to ask him a question, he cut me off, wouldn't answer my question, like in a group interview setting. But you got to roll with the punches. You just have to. As long as I'm true to myself and honor my own code, then I feel fine. Which I mentioned the O'Neill story. I was disappointed in myself that I didn't handle that better. Even though, again, the story held up under scrutiny, Paul deserved more of a forum to voice his thoughts on that. So I did apologize, and we eventually worked everything out.
So you always felt confident that you were reporting the facts and that things were well sourced. But in that O'Neill instance, you're talking about maybe communication, transparency, relying on that relationship more to alert him to kind of where you're going with this thing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I had a story where essentially Joe Torre had a team meeting where he didn't mention O'Neill by name, but it was pretty evident that O'Neill was one of the main violators of just an on the field thing that was going on. Nothing too sexy, but in retrospect, I did talk to Paul, but not as thoroughly as I should have, and he was very angry. And again, he had some. I think he probably wouldn't have been thrilled with me anyway if I had done it more correctly, but I was disappointed in myself, and but I did. Again, I apologize, and we after about a month or two of tension, we talked it through, and we're in good terms now.
How has, forgetting the COVID situation that we're in right now and how that's impacted every business in theory, how has journalism's obviously evolved a lot since you got into it. How has it changed, and how has it impacted the way you go about your business? There are so many people reporting out there. Everybody can stand up a media entity at any given moment. Anybody can blog. Anybody can do anything. How has it changed the way you operate, or has it changed the way you operate?
I wouldn't say it's changed the way I operate, except I feel like I have to defend my existence more, I guess, and explain to people more what it is, what I do, and why it's different than others. In terms of, I still do the same job I did when I first started 27 years ago. The way I produce the product is a lot different,
Sure.
The website and some video and all that. But yeah, the fundamental job has stayed the same. What hasn't stayed the same is the presence of social media and blogs and all these people, trying to hone in on my turf, which is different. And hey, some of them are very talented. Excuse me. Some of them come up with legitimate information, and when that happens, you just gotta tip your cap. But for sure, the standards in those arenas are not necessarily the same standards as I try to have in terms of what you throw out there, what you put out there. And so too much of my time is spent putting out fires, because my editor will understand and will say, hey, what about this? This has been tweeted. And I remember, I think it was back in November, December, some Canadian media person tweeted the Mets have an agreement with George Springer. And it was obviously inaccurate. He's now going to the Blue Jays. So a lot of that, a lot of bad rumors get thrown out there that I have to spend time, vetting, and in many cases they turn out to not be true.
One of my favorite movies, maybe my favorite movie of all time, is All the President's Men. Mm-hmm. And I watch it periodically. I've actually watched it recently because of the times that we're in. Yeah. But But what I enjoy about it is the fact that there was a heavy focus on aiming first, shooting second. Whereas now it feels like so often people shoot first and then they worry about aiming later. How do you stay true to the fact that, you know, when I read your stuff, Ken, I always learn something. There's always a new or novel thought. There's a source that you don't have anywhere else. How do you stay true to your way of going about the business in an evolving landscape like this?
Well, I don't struggle with that really, because I have confidence in myself. I've, thankfully gotten to a certain level. I also am blessed to be backed by bosses who don't want me to shoot first and aim later. We want to be right, and we try to break news. I think we break our fair share, but I'd rather lead the league in hits than in at bats, if I can use a metaphor from the very sport I cover. So I'd rather I'd rather be right, more often than throw stuff out there more often and have too much of it turn out bad.
It's so interesting, right? The difference between elite and average, right? I had the best-selling author, leadership guru, and whisperer to college football coaches everywhere on this show, John Gordon. And John Gordon shared a story with me. He said, Andrew, the difference between, and I think this may be actually from Bull Durham, and he's recycling it, but he said, Andrew, the difference between a 350 hitter in baseball and a 250 hitter in baseball is 1.4 hits per week. So you better find something to be a little bit better at than everybody else. But you don't have to be that much better at than everybody else. You have to be a little better each week than everybody else. What for you is that differentiator?
That's a great question. Gosh, that's a tough question too. I think in terms of my actual job, I think my ability to analyze things statistically is pretty strong. And I think I can have a good read on a situation, on a player, on a transaction. So maybe that, if you're asking, essentially asking me to identify my primary separator. I'd have to go with that.
So, Ken, I want to pivot a little bit. You've been around. I mean, you mentioned some great ball players, some Hall of Famers early in our discussion. You've been around so many great managers, coaches, players in New York and on the national beat. This show is, we talk a lot about success here: leadership, work ethic, teamwork. Who stands out that you've encountered in your career that on the field was just, an exceptional leader, teammate? Talk about that for a minute.
One person who comes to mind is Joe Girardi. Now that I'm Philadelphia Phillies manager, former Yankees manager, he didn't have the best bedside manner, but he's always working on it. He knows that's not his strength. But in terms of running a game and preparation and readiness, he's maybe the best I've ever seen, or certainly among the best. Especially among those I've spent the most time with. And when we would ask him questions after the game, why did you do that move? It was very, very rare when he would come up with an answer. I'd be like, what? Even if I disagreed, say, okay, I see what you did there. I disagree with it, but I can see the validation from that. So he stands out as really just a good leader in that regard. In terms of a player, one person who comes to mind is Hideki Matsui from the Yankees. I thought he was a guy who didn't need to show everyone he was a leader. It just was, just from the world experience he had. He was this idol in Japan, and he brought a whole fleet of media with him to the Yankees, and just the way he managed that situation, he was on such good terms with the media. He took care of them, and so it never created any stress in the clubhouse because they all respected him. And Matsui told all of his teammates, "Look, I'm sorry that I'm bringing this with me. I'm bringing this posse with me into your world. If you ever have any problems with any of them, let me know, and I will take care of it." So I think just that level of awareness and leadership really resonated with me.
That's a great segue. I have two more questions for you, Ken. One is on why it seems like so many players and coaches and managers who come to New York from other markets tend to struggle. I mean, I'm a Mets fan, and I've watched my fair share of guys who come here with a lot of fanfare, and they just can't seem to make it under the New York lights. Talk about that for a minute. Why do some succeed and why do some fail, in your opinion?
Yeah, I really do believe that you have to be wired a certain way to succeed in New York, and especially when we're talking about professional sports. And I've told this story before, and I'll recycle because I think it's a good one. Randy Johnson, one of the best pitchers in baseball history, and he maneuvered his way to the Yankees. He wanted to pitch for the Yankees. Arizona Diamondbacks traded him to the Yankees at his insistence, and he gets to the Yankees. And, starting pitcher pitches every 5 days. And when he pitched for the Arizona Diamondbacks and Seattle Mariners, he knew, all right, when I pitch after the game, I got to talk to the media, but that's it. I don't need to do anything else with the media the other 4 days. So, he would have a bad start with the Yankees, and, Joe Torre would say, "Oh, yeah, Randy's going to work on this for the next time, with his arm slot or wherever it was." And so he would, throw, every pitcher throws between starts. So he would do his throwing session in the bullpen between the start, and he would come back to his locker, and all the whole media would be waiting for him. And it's like his head virtually exploded. He's like, what are you guys doing here? And, they're like, "Well, you're Randy Johnson. You're really important to the team, and we want to report on how it went in your bullpen session. Do you think you'll be okay for the next time?" And he just could not understand this. Like, what do you mean? I was like, "Well, Randy, it's New York. Like, we report pretty aggressively. We scrutinize everything. You can't just skate from one start to the next." And I think he really, really struggled with that. And he had a rough time in New York. He also had physical ailments. It wasn't just that. But after 2 years, he had enough. He wanted to leave. So I think that, to me, it is an example of some guys are wired to handle that, and some clearly are not.
So last question, Ken, not just journalism, but what's your advice, the Ken Davidoff tip to anybody who's starting out early on in their career? They're coming out of college, they're finding their way. What's your advice?
Yeah. So I would say humility and hustle. Those to me are my secrets. I deal with a lot of young people who seek me out for advice, and I can't tell you how annoyed I get. I mean, I'm a grumpy guy in general, so maybe some people are nicer than me, but so many people will say, "Hey, let me know if you have some time to talk." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean, let me know? Like, I'm helping you, right? That if you have time to talk, I would greatly appreciate it." Just little things like that. So just respect your elders and work your butt off. Like, there's no excuse in any job for being outworked. You're going to lose out on things because you lack that experience, maybe because you lack certain skill sets. I admit, I write about baseball. Analyzing the actual game is not my strongest suit, in terms of this pitch, or anything. I know that's not, I'm competent, but it's not my highest, ability. But you should never, you can't just shrug off laziness. Like, hard work has to be part of the equation.
Humility and hustle. Ken, we'll end there. Thanks for spending a few minutes with Everybody Pulls the Tarp. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.